In the summer of 1987, Kevin Ives and Don Henry were normal teenagers living in Arkansas. One night, they journeyed out into the dark to go hunting as they had done many times before. This time, however, they would not return home. Instead, they got caught in the crossfire of something far more sinister. Today, we're diving into the case known as the Boys on the Tracks. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the unknown. I am your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me hearing about this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
What do you mean they got caught up in stuff? Like, what happened? What could you possibly get caught up in? Was it some kind of military thing, some government thing, some crime syndicate? Like, what's happening here?
It gets wild. At first glance, when we were looking over topics to explore and put onto the slate, we saw this one, we were thinking, okay, maybe this is a lighter one, let's kind of move it down the line. But dude, when we cracked into this case, it then enters into a completely different case, and it gets wild. It gets wild, with far-reaching consequences far beyond these poor boys.
Interesting. Okay, so they stumbled like movie style into some really deep stuff.
Literally, truly movie style.
Oof.
We're going to get into all of it. Sensitive topics in the description if you'd like to check those out, because we are talking about, again, two minors here. But this case is wild from head to toe, backwards and forwards. I even hate to describe it, but you're right. It is kind of like a movie as it unfolds. And then once we get into the theories, we're going to spend a lot of our time in the theories. I'm going to walk you through the incident, the accident that happened, the investigation that unfollowed, as well as the court cases that unfurled. And then our first theory is where we're going to live for probably half or more than half of this episode, because there's so many details, so many twists and turns. It is incredible where this ends up going. And it starts to make me question the structure of our society and like who is plotting and what, and like who can you trust anymore? It starts to get into that realm.
Right. Who's pulling the strings of what? I mean, it could, the rabbit hole could just keep going, because you could be like, oh my goodness, this person has so much power, but there's someone above them that has even more power, right? Like,
yes,
it's a chain that goes on. And you'll see it like, say, like a movie where it's like, oh, there's this gangster that's like running the block. It's like, okay, but they serve to like a higher mob tier or whatever. And it's just like, oh, it's so much smaller. You're way down the chain there.
Right. And we're just like starting with an accidental like overlap and like a peek into this world, this underbelly of twisted turns and who is actually on whose side and who has leverage over who. And it, like I said, it starts to get out there, but let me contain it. Let me bring it all back. You know, we do have a relatively focused accident. And so, like I said, I'm going to walk you into all of it. Mm-hmm. Feel free to stop me as you have any questions. But before we dive in, some housekeeping. Red Web is busy doing lots of things. And so I want to talk about some of those things that you can get access to at redwebpod.com. It is the #1 way to support us. This Wednesday, you can choose our fate, whether it be movie clubs, topics we talk about, debates we have, or episodes that we put into the primary feed here in the podcast. We have a poll on Wednesday, so come vote, choose our fates. And then on Friday, I don't know how it took us this long to do it, Fredo, but we have Movie Club finally covering Men in Black. This is long overdue.
It does seem kind of criminal that it took us this long to cover Men in Black. It's such a natural thing to watch and cover. It doesn't make any sense, but I think we just steered real hard into horror, like initially.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But it feels so parallel to this community task force we've built, to the lore we've built with the show over 5.5 years. This idea that we have a task force HQ that has like tons of like floors of endless hallways and corridors. I look at the I don't know, whatever it's called in Men in Black, the main office, and I go, that's it. That's just one of our floors. Aliens in places.
It totally is. It completely is.
That's happening, like I said, this Friday over at redwebpod.com. Come sign up, join the task force. Even if you're free, we tease what episodes we're doing every week. So there's even stuff for you to join up for free with. So come on over, hang out, join the community. But without further ado, there's a lot to talk about today. So let me dive into this case. Now, this begins in the early morning hours of August 23rd, 1987. We have 16-year-old Don Henry and 17-year-old Kevin Ives, who, in the middle of the night, essentially, left Henry's home. It was approximately 12:15 a.m. Now, right out of the gate, I'm going to give you some faces to the names.
Okay.
And so here is an image of these two boys. On the left, you have Don Henry, and on the right, you have Kevin Ives.
It's two young boys.
Mm-hmm. Classic 80s style.
Very 80s style hair.
The feathery mullets and the polo shirts and everything, yeah.
Yep. And they look happy. They look like they're chilling, like good friends doing their thing.
Absolutely. These two were very close. In fact, they were best friends. And they lived in Alexander, Arkansas, which, to give you an idea of where we're at, this is about 15 miles or 24 kilometers southwest of the capital of Little Rock. Now, the pair had set out to go what's called spotlighting. I had never heard of this before, but apparently it was pretty common. It is a term used to describe a type of night hunting in which one person would use a flashlight to identify an animal somewhere in the dark. Usually, I think, to illuminate the eyes, not so much as to illuminate the entire woods.
Right. Just want to get that gleam in the eye.
Exactly. Yeah. So deer have that. Dude, if you're ever in the woods and you see 1,000 of those, spiders.
Oh, dude, I see that in the grass. Like when I walk my dog at night with my little flashlight, in the grass is like a bunch of little glints, and I'm like, that's all spiders, man.
Yep. And so that's a good example of, different scale, but, animals very similar. So one would illuminate the eyes of a creature while the other then would fire at the animal. Now, I should say spotlighting was deemed illegal in Arkansas, but that didn't stop these two boys from going out. They're both avid hunters.
Is it because it could be the glint of an eye of either an animal you're not supposed to kill or another human being? It's just not enough information that's being relayed back to you?
It could be. I mean, I didn't look that closely, to be totally honest. Christian, I'm curious if you don't mind helping out. My first instinct is hunting in the dark is just precarious. It's dangerous.
True.
You don't know if that's usually why you wear bright orange, and so you can see a hunter even if they're camouflaged. You don't want to accidentally miss a creature and hit somebody who you didn't know was in the back. I would also say that there could be an argument to be made about the humanity of it or the humane angle of it. But I don't know otherwise, so I'm curious if Christian has some more insight.
So it seems like I'm not finding anything that's, from an official source stating the reason for its being illegal, but just looking at online communities like Reddit threads, it seems the issue with it is that it's inhumane because animals tend to freeze when the light hits them. And so it kind of removes the challenge, quote unquote, and it removes the opportunity for them to escape. But then similar to what you were saying, Trevor, going out at night with weapons is incredibly dangerous, and that adds another level of risk.
Okay, interesting. Well, that makes sense. It didn't stop these two from going out and doing it, like I said. They were avid hunters, and they're young men kind of doing their thing, getting up to no good. Now, their whereabouts throughout the night remain unknown, but at approximately 4 a.m. that same night, the boys were spotted lying on train tracks. This is where the story quickly takes a sinister turn. Now, some reports state that the boys were wrapped in a pale green tarp with a gun laying nearby. Again, I should preface this right out front. There's a few conflicting sources. I'll try my best to highlight those differences as they arise throughout this case. But they were seen by a train engineer named Stephen Schroyer, who was aboard the Union Pacific train that was on those tracks headed through that area at that time. And he and his train's crew noticed something on the tracks. And when he realized there were two bodies on the tracks, not just some object, he put the train into emergency mode, slammed on the brakes, honked the horn as he and 3 other crew members saw these unmoving boys approaching the train very, very quickly. Now, although they tried to stop, they were ultimately unsuccessful in stopping on time, and the boys were indeed run over. It all seemed to happen so fast, and in Schroyer's words, quote, "From the time that we had placed the train into an emergency position and laid down on the horn, I would estimate about 3 to 5 seconds to impact." And so A train of this size, I mean, it was 75 cars long, which is over a mile.
Oof.
It weighed 6,000 tons. It was going 52 miles an hour. You imagine it takes quite a bit of distance to stop something like this.
Yeah, that's not going to stop quick. And it's for the safety of all the carts too behind it. I mean, the fast you stop fast, it's all just going to jam into each other. There has to be a significant amount of distance, and that's just, it's unfortunate.
That's just physics, yeah.
Yeah, just physics,
So to be a little bit more specific, the train was still braking and slowing down. They know that they had hit something, and they had identified it as human bodies. And so they continued with the stop, and it took about another half a mile, and then they were stopped somewhere around 4:25 a.m. The crew then immediately called the police and reported the incident to railroad officials, and by 4:40 a.m., both local and state police were on the scene, and an investigation was underway to figure out why these two humans, we don't know who they are yet, but why they were on the tracks, and if we can figure out, of course, anything else.
Right.
Now, as this investigation immediately goes underway, police believe that this might have been a double suicide, despite the protests from the train crew that kind of indicated something didn't sit right about that. In their memory, when they recollect this, they're seeing two unmoving bodies. Whether they're dead already or unconscious is yet to be determined, but they're thinking, this isn't a two conscious, knowingly doing this kind of people. It doesn't sit right to call this suicide, in their opinions.
Right. I mean, you never know. You know what I mean? But it's not lining up so far. These two would have a pact to do this kind of thing. Especially when it seems like they're hunters. They have weapons. They have firearms. That seems like a more humane way to go about it. But also it seems like they packed up with intent to do something that night as opposed to end things,
Certainly. I think that's a good observation.
Sometimes there are traces or letters left behind, or just the way they pack and go out. I'm sure if you look at the things that they carried on their person, might have been okay, they very much intended to go out and come back. They carried all these things. They had all this stuff with them. The intent was to go out and do said thing.
Sure, absolutely. And on top of that, I remember reading or listening to as well interviews from Schroyer, and he's like, this green tarp just didn't sit right with him. And it was kind of off to the side. It's almost as if they were trying to be obscured, but the tarp had shifted in some way, allowing him to identify that it was bodies. And so that's what really is sitting in his mind, Yeah. And there are two different angles here. Some reports state that they told police and that the police could not find this, quote, pale green tarp. But they did find a shattered .22 caliber rifle that they brought in for evidence. There are other reports that claim that the train crew never even mentioned the green tarp, but again, they are all adamant that they told police about it. And so the fact that the police either didn't have it or couldn't find it is a little bit of an interesting kindling on the road I'm about to take you down. It definitely stood out to us as we were researching this, but that's the first kind of inconsistency. Now, when the parents of Henry and Ives both realized that the boys never returned home from their night hunt, they too began searching in earnest for their boys, not knowing what had taken place that night. In fact, it wouldn't be until later in the following day that local police would contact both of these families after identifying their bodies through the dental records. Because again, they wouldn't have known right away, just given the situation.
Right.
Be vague. The results, the aftermath, they wouldn't know who it was until, dental records came through.
So was the weapon shattered because it was also run over?
It's very possible. I've seen it said both ways. One, that the rifle was shattered and off to the side. I've also heard it that that they had noticed that it had been placed off to the side. But yeah, I would imagine it's because the train ran over it, if it truly is in a shattered state.
Right.
Now, ultimately, it's unclear if the families themselves contacted police or if police came forward to them first with the identities. In fact, we wouldn't know why they didn't go to police. Again, that's in the minutia. We've seen so many different cases where people go to the police first, or they do their own search and then go to police. So the timeline of that day is a little hazy. We don't know the order of things, but suffice to say, police contacted the families. And afterward, the rifle was confirmed to be Henry's, and the train tracks that the boys were found on were only about half a mile or 0.8 kilometers away from Henry's house in Alexander, so it does stand to reason that this might have been nearby where they were hunting. But again, the question is, how did they end up on the tracks? Why was there a tarp placed on both of them?
Yep.
And based on eyewitness testimony, why were they seemingly unconscious at the time of the accident?
Right. Was there foul play before that? You know, they were just thrown onto the tracks as a decoy for what really happened.
It's very possible, yeah. So at the top here of the investigation, the deaths of Henry and Ives were ruled accidental by the Arkansas State Medical Examiner, Fahmy Malak. So I'm going to talk a lot about Dr. Malak here because he is the centerpiece of a lot of this. And again, knowing the road ahead, I'm just highlighting this name so you think about it. So
Doctor being the centerpiece? Interesting.
So again, to reiterate, this is the Arkansas State Medical Examiner. And he states that the boys were alive when they were run over by the train, but had been in a deep sleep. His conclusion was that the boys had been smoking the equivalent of 20 marijuana joints. We don't know if that's split between the two of them or 20 each, but suffice to say, that's a pretty hefty amount for anybody.
How do they wind up on the tracks? Like the both of them? You know what I mean? Like what would go through their mind? Be like, let's both go on the track.
Under the influence of THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, the psychoactive element of marijuana, the idea here, I'm kind of inferring, is that they wouldn't have been in the right headspace, that fatigue or even a deep level of near unconsciousness was setting over them. And so maybe that's how they ended up in such a precarious position. They weren't thinking right. But again, I'm thinking, what is this tarp doing? Did it exist or did it not?
Also, the fact they couldn't find the tarp, I don't know. That's a whole thing too. Was it just super windy and it blew away? You think it get caught somewhere and then you can just grab it?
Hold on to those questions, man. I'm pulling back. I'm peeling back the layers of this deeper conspiracy. But basically, the doctor's saying that they had so much THC in their system that they were unable to hear the horn of the train approaching them. Now, I'm not a medical expert, nor an expert on drugs of any kind. But it is said in our research that THC can worsen things regarding hearing, like tinnitus, over time. There's no evidence to suggest that THC can eliminate hearing completely in the short term. So not hearing the blaring train horn approaching you feels a little strange.
Yeah, that's a little weird. I mean, at that point, you're just thinking that they're just so kind of like loopy, and that's why they ended up on the tracks, but...
Yeah. So local authorities were inclined to believe Malak's consensus. They didn't question it whatsoever. But I think it's important to note that this ruling was generally unaccepted by both Henry and Ives' families and by the general public. So immediately, the public is sniffing this out as a little fishy, and the only people buying this 20 joint kind of almost THC overdose kind of theory are the authorities themselves. So questions began to arise. For example, how the boys could be coherent enough to neatly lie on these tracks symmetrically, but not be able to hear the train's horns as it was approaching.
True, good point.
So during the trial, toxicologists Dr. James Garriott and Dr. Arthur McBray both testified before a grand jury that anyone falling unconscious from THC overuse was essentially unheard of. Them going into a deep, like, listen, I'm sure if you have enough THC in your system, you're going to get tired and probably fall asleep. We're talking about unconscious, right? Like shake them, rattle them, and roll them, and they're going to stay asleep kind of thing. So they also criticized Dr. Malak because he did not perform a mass spectrometry, which would have been the most effective, in their opinion, test for determining the amount of drugs in one's system. Now, going back to it, it's kind of unclear what test Dr. Malak did perform instead, especially if it's giving him the inclination that they have 20 joints worth of THC in their system. So immediately we have two other toxicologists, which this is their whole job, going, he didn't really use the right test, and also his conclusion is wildly outlandish, and it would be a first of its kind. So immediately, this is starting to feel a little flimsy. Like, what's going on here?
Why this weird kind of like, I don't know, you know what I mean? Because it's so far out there. No one's really kind of made this statement or conclusion ever. And so what is the doctor thinking? Or Was he working for somebody? Is there a reason? Is he like helping cover something up, or you know what I mean? You just start questioning things at this point because it's so far out there. And then I love it. I love that the fact that you have it backed by professionals, like other medical professionals, going like, "Hey, we don't know what this doctor was doing.
Yeah.
None of this makes sense. None of this adds up." So,
dude, I love it. It's like peer review on record in the trial with a grand jury.
yes.
Yeah. I love that layering of like, okay, this is prominent. And you're right. This is feeling really fishy right out the gate. And it's kind of why the family and the community are kind of like, this doesn't feel right. Something's off, but we don't know what it is. To add a little bit more to Dr. Malik and fill in some colorful backstory here, we have journalist Mara Leverett, who wrote a book about this very case entitled The Boys on the Tracks. And in this book, they discuss how Dr. Malik was accused by his own staff of keeping outdated crime lab tools. So immediately, you're working with outdated tools, you're going to get outdated results that are going to sway cases left and right, potentially.
Okay.
With this, he allegedly fabricated findings in autopsy reports before certain cases went to court. So he's kind of like ChatGPT. It's like he's got the tools, he's got the expertise, and he's just filling in answers and making it up a little bit.
Why would you do that? Why would you ever think that's okay? And then also it's just like to make a statement that is just no one else would make and be like, you know what? That is my answer that I will submit to the court. Like,
right. I mean, it sounds kind of like close to reality, but it's wrong. So it feels like I said, the analogy to AI. It's like, why are you phoning in the homework in such an extreme way that it feels outlandish? I don't know. I don't know if that was a cost-saving measure, if it was like limited resources, or something more sinister, like covering something up, or being lazy, or negligent. I don't know, but it's worth talking about. Additionally, there's something else strange going on. The hospital where the boys were examined had no record of their presence there.
what?
The hospital clerk Leverett was talking to and asking questions of told her this, quote, "That's why the families were not billed," end quote. So they weren't billed because they weren't there, but they were there. But because they weren't billed, the family's like, fine, we'll take this freebie. But no, something is hiding their tracks is what this feels like.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. It seems like tracks are being hidden in just like little pieces here and there, because then it's like, why would that not be reported? There's so many processes that needs to be done. You're bringing in a body, especially in the condition there's so many hands-on, there's like so many protocols, and to have like no traces, that's someone deliberately going and making sure that there's no traces. Right? Not necessarily like, oh, the whole hospital is compromised, but it's very much so like, okay, someone somewhere, at least one person, is going through and scrubbing records, right? Because you think that everyone else is doing their due process, and so it's like the process maybe happened and then someone went through and scrubbed it, as opposed to like, you know, someone being like, hey, don't write this down or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to color this too much, because as we're researching it, this was my gut instinct as well. And I know where this is going. So I don't want to bring too much hindsight back. But you're right. I mean, this is either someone going through and undoing all the protocols and due diligence that people have done, or it's a slew of systemic failures where people are not keeping evidence properly, they're not tracking records properly, and they're a negligent doctor. Like, how many people can fail in one case?
It could be that, but it's just like, man, when you start adding so many links to the chain,
Yes, right.
it just becomes harder and harder to have it be something that's believable. So you're telling me all these different people and all these different apartments and all these different time frames are all failing in the same way of just negligence? Like,
Yeah.
that's hard. That's hard to swallow. Not impossible, but it's just less likely, you know?
Precisely. One feels like it takes less assumptions than the other.
Right.
So not only are their claims of drug use dubious, we also have missing hospital records. And in addition to that, the EMT officers who responded to the scene questioned the ruling of an accidental death. They stated that the blood found on the bodies of the boys was dark as if it lacked oxygen, right? Which would lead them to believe that they might have already been dead or bleeding prior to the accident with the train itself. Basically saying, it seems like the bodies were already bloody beforehand. Why? But that didn't seem to get heeded, listened to, or pursued in any way.
Why not? It just seems like an obvious thing of like, oh, there's an ulterior motive here. Let's go track that down.
It's one of those frustrating moments where we go, with hindsight, why aren't we chasing all these things? In fact, I don't even want to say hindsight. In the moment, people are saying, why aren't we chasing this down right now?
Yeah.
You know? Authorities are sticking to Dr. Malik's kind of disposition on the drug testing, and that's where they're staying firm. Now, to throw a wrench into this new line of thinking for the case, Saline County Sheriff James Steed agreed also with Dr. Malik. He reportedly told Benton Courier, which was a local newspaper, that there was nothing at the scene of the crime to suggest that it was anything more than what he called a strange accident. So now, again, it feels like there's this wedge driven between essentially like the local police and everybody else. Linda Ives, mother of Kevin, published a letter in the same Courier criticizing Steed's administration and how they were handling this case. In February 1988, the lawyer of the families, Dan Harmon, I want you to remember that name, this is the lawyer for both families, made a deal with Steed. They agreed that if the parents withdrew their criticism of Steed and supported him, that they would formally investigate the case. A little quid pro quo. Nothing sinister about that. Withdraw your criticism. Say something nice about me and we'll investigate what happened to your dead son. That's wild.
That's, yeah, what? Or just
That's
you're
cursed.
supposed to do that. Like,
Exactly.
what is this rigmarole that's happening here? There's just so much chaos. I just, you can't help but think that there's someone behind the scenes pulling the strings, right?
It's stinky.
Applying pressure, something.
Yeah.
Because it's so blatantly chaotic. I'm just like, what? Someone keep these people accountable.
Yeah, dude. I wanted to tease this at the beginning, but since you're saying this now, I'll tease it now.
Okay.
This one might go all the way to the top.
Really?
This one might go all the way to the top. So hold on to that. I'm sorry for the tease.
What do these boys even what did they stumble into, man?
Right. They better have identified 3 different unique species of alien and a frickin' iPhone in the 80s. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
this feels
Yes.
like, what else? What are they walking into?
Like, what is happening here, dude?
So this agreement happens. It's brokered by a man that's a lawyer, Dan Harmon, not the guy who wrote and directed Community or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. Later in that same month, it's February 1988, the Ives and Henry families hold a press conference to state that they believe their sons had been murdered. They're officially going on record to say, I don't think this was accidental. I think there's something more sinister here. There's a murderer out there who has done something and knows something. And they put it in a press conference and tell the community. The following day, the boys' bodies were actually dug up. They were exhumed, and a second autopsy was performed on them, this time by a different medical examiner. Thank the Lord, Dr. Joseph Burton.
It would be wild to let the same examiner do it. That'd be so stupid.
That would be crooked as heck.
A waste of time.
Yeah, and this guy is from a completely different jurisdiction, so he has no relation to local authorities or even state authorities. He's coming from Atlanta, I would assume Georgia, but I'm sure there's also Atlanta, Arkansas.
This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Rocket Money. Have you ever had a moment when you realized you needed help getting your finances under control? Was it a specific purchase, bill, or bank statement that made you think, I need to fix this? Enter Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. With Rocket Money, you can set budgets and goals, get personalized insights and regular reports, and receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, refunds, and low balances. The app consolidates checking, savings, loans, and investments into a single dashboard to give you a clear view of your financial picture. I could stand to benefit so much from Rocket Money. The snapshot it gives of what my finances look like, what I can afford to spend, what I can't, it saves so much time and headache for me having to calculate all that by myself and do some number crunching. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/redweb. That's rocketmoney.com/redweb. rocketmoney.com/redweb.
Now, Dr. Burton is looking at these bodies under a second autopsy, and he finds that in his investigation that the boys each had smoked somewhere between 1 and 3 joints. Okay, so we're in a less exaggerative world. We have a second doctor coming through and verifying that there's some level of THC in their blood. This eliminates the argument that they were unconscious or in a deep sleep due to the amount that they had smoked, though. So immediately, while we're getting some similarities, we're also getting massive differences in conclusion. He also found that each of them had been wounded prior to being placed on the tracks.
There it is.
Specifically, yeah, there it is. Specifically, he found that Henry's shirt had been slashed as though he was stabbed in the back, and Ives' skull had been crushed as if struck by some sort of blunt force object. He also found, and this is where my heart weeps, I hate to think about this. He also found that Dr. Malik, when performing the first autopsy, had sawed Ives' skull in such a way, like in multiple different directions, in his words, essentially mutilating it, making it nearly impossible to determine which of the fractures on the skull were the first ones, i.e., was there in fact blunt force trauma to this head, creating a fracture before the train did its deed. And so, if nothing else, this is malpractice, this is negligence on the highest degree on Dr. Malik's behalf. I'm not directly involved with the case, so I can't really say that, but that seems to be what is being floated here.
Yeah, there's definitely like something that went on behind the scenes. There's just way too many things pointing to it, and we're having multiple, I don't know, it's all piecing together to, like there's a conspiracy, something's going on here.
Something here, dude. Yeah, and Task Force looks at the runtime and they go, oh yeah, there's lots of coming.
Yeah, there is. Oh man.
So we're getting close to the theories in which we'll live for the next half of the episode or so, but before we get there, there's a lot of other things. 5 additional pathologists observed the case, right? They agreed with Dr. Burton's findings. That is, they believe that Henry and Ives were both killed prior to being run over by the train.
Yep.
We're getting more outside opinions, and they're continuing to stack evidence against all of the stuff earlier. All that stuff that felt fishy, okay. It turns out it was fishy.
Yep, which we like to see. Thank you for validating our concerns and our thoughts here.
Absolutely. Now, because of these findings, as well as the testimonies from Dr. Garriott and Dr. McBray, the grand jury reversed Dr. Malik's ruling of accidental death. After the fact, one of Dr. Malik's assistants actually said that he had found what appeared to be a stab wound during Henry's autopsy. Remember, this is the one that Dr. Burton said was a stab wound in the back, or a slash?
Yep, with the torn shirt.
Dr. Malik's assistant also pointed this out to Dr. Malik, but Dr. Malik had told him to, quote, not worry about it.
Okay, that's not how that works.
Hey, you're doing an autopsy. Don't worry about these wounds.
Don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Nothing to worry about. What? Someone needs to be just overlooking, like just standing in the room, looking at them, holding them people accountable, because this is wild.
In theory, it would be Dr. Malik, right?
Yeah.
Now, before I dive into this next piece of information, it is a little confusing because there are 2 different reports depending on the sources you look at. Ultimately, the conclusions are the same, that this case went from ruled as accidental to undetermined. Some reports state that that happened in July of 1988. Others have a few more details with a different timeline. The other timeline states that this change from accidental to undetermined happened February 26, 1988, and that this case went before a grand jury in April 1988, and then in June, it officially went to probable homicides. So ultimately, I should just say the case is no longer accidental death,
right,
and it is either between undetermined or probable homicides.
Yep.
2 different realities to juggle with. That's just what happens with these cases sometimes. But now we're in the summer of 1988. So now that we're in the realm of probable homicides, it's worth mentioning that eventually it was labeled and declared homicides. So I just wanted to walk you through the timeline of accidental death to undetermined, all the way down the way to, okay, now it's official on record in the case that says these were homicides.
Got it, yep.
So forgive me if it was a little confusing to get there. Now, even after the grand jury ruled that the deaths were homicides, Steed insisted that foul play was not involved. Additionally, he refused to authorize any funds to aid the investigation. That's concerning.
Yep.
It was also concluded that he had not conducted a very thorough investigation himself, as Ives' foot, the young boy's foot, had been severed from his body, and it wasn't even found on the scene until 2 days later.
Oof.
So what does that tell you about boots on the ground investigation in the aftermath?
Right. I mean, if we're finding, I mean, it could take a minute. 2 days is an insane amount, but you think a foot would be found if it's a intact foot, you know what I mean?
You're looking for the bodies. You don't go, well, this one's missing a foot, whatever.
True.
How do you miss this?
I mean, a couple days though. It doesn't seem bad, like just initially thinking.
Sure, and on its own right, sure. It could be an accident, an oversight, or whatever. But with all these other things stacking up, refusing
Right.
to fund it,
Yeah.
refusing to insist that, to kind of go with what the idea of foul play or whatever, it all kind of starts to feel a little extra fishy. Like, why are you still combating this like momentum that is
Yes.
these actual unfurlings of examinations are leaning it towards?
Yeah, if you're looking at everything as one picture, 1000% yes.
Yeah. Now, in addition to all of that, remember, this is the county sheriff for the area, is Steed. There's also evidence to suggest that Steed lied about where he had sent the boys' clothes for further examination. Now, I'm kind of truncating a lot of information here, but Leverett claims, the author, that the clothes were sent to Arkansas State Crime Lab, not the Federal Bureau of Investigation, as they should have been. Now, with the repeated mishandling of this case, Steed lost the re-election for county sheriff in the following election. I can't imagine why.
Yeah.
But the public also called for the removal of Dr. Malik as the Arkansas State Medical Examiner. Because why wouldn't you call for
Why
it?
wouldn't you? Like, get the whole, like, get it all out, you know what I mean? There's an infection, like, get all of it, because otherwise it's just gonna repopulate.
It seems like an apt analogy, 100%. However, this is where things get a little prickly. Dr. Malik was close friends with the at-the-time governor of Arkansas. Do you know who the governor was in the late 80s of Arkansas?
Oh.
None other than Bill Clinton.
Oh. Oh, no. It's all gonna
It
go
goes
to the
all the way to the
top.
top.
Sheesh.
We'll talk about him after this doozy of a theory. He does come back, and there's, some conspiracy around his involvement. But yeah, so Dr. Malik being close friends with the governor, who was ignoring the calls from his constituents about the removal of Dr. Malik, kind of enabled him to keep his position. Governor's kind of like, I'm focused on running for president and keeping my rap sheet clean. Again, I'm kind of painting with opinion here, but there are some conspiracies that say, like, maybe he just turned a blind eye and didn't look closely enough to realize that Dr. Malik was maybe negligent and should have been removed.
Right. Because, I mean, I'm sure he has a million things that are constantly pressed on his desk.
Now, it wouldn't be, regarding Dr. Malik, until September 10th, 1991, which is 4 years after the boys' deaths, that Dr. Malik would officially resign from his position. He wasn't fired, he wasn't forced to leave, but he did resign in relative disgrace, likely due to, per some articles in Arkansas, due to the mishandling of a number of cases. So, justice wasn't swift in this case, but again, I don't know this guy, and I'm not omniscient regarding all the casework he's done. I don't want to sit here and assassinate his personality or his career, but from just the lens of this case, I can totally understand why people would be very frustrated with him being in that position.
I feel like it's all it takes, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very big case.
And again, he did resign, likely due to the mishandling of several cases. It wasn't just this one. So with that is the investigation and the discussion around the accident. Now, there is still a lot more to dive into with the discussion of this first theory. It is enormous. There's a lot to discuss there. So before we dive into that and open up a lot more curiosities, just want to stop for a second. Are there any questions or any inclinations that you have at this point, Fredo?
Nothing at the moment. I'm very curious to see, like, if we, during the theories and stuff, how if it opens up in terms of why possibly the government got involved and so felt the need to so heavy-handedly detract the investigation, because it's got to be something, right? So I'm interested to see what those theories are, because I think right now the picture is painted pretty clear. It's just a matter of like, why was this done? You know, what did they fall upon?
Those are great questions. Like, if you're looking at this from the lens of the late 80s, especially somebody in the community, you're going, right, there's mishandling, but why? Why repeatedly? Is it ignorance or a true belief in this other position over here that is kind of ill-founded?
Yep.
Or is there something else?
Yes.
And if it's something else, why? What could possibly be that thing? Well, that is a perfect introduction to this theory that we're going to discuss, because it attempts to answer why. Why the government might have wanted to cover this up. Why officials, all the way up to maybe the governor, were all involved in some sort of way that was very frustrating. In 1985, let me take you back a few years prior, 2 years before the death of Henry and Ives. You have 21-year-old Billy Hainline and 25-year-old Dennis Decker. They were found in a very similar manner. The pair was unmoving, lying on a railroad 20 miles south of a place in Oklahoma called Poto, but it also might be Po-O. For our resident Oklahoma residents, please let me know. Now, Po-O is approximately 125 miles or 200 kilometers northwest of Alexander, so it's not super far away, but it's not immediately close. Now, just like Ives and Henry, Hainline and Decker were both run over by a train. The coroner in LaFleur County, Oklahoma, ruled their deaths as accidental, citing that they were drunk and had passed out on the railroad. The Oklahoma State Medical Examiner confirmed that their blood alcohol content was near the legal limit. The examiner ruled that the cause of death was unknown. A month after this incident, a methamphetamine lab was discovered 1.5 miles north of where these men were found, leading some to suspect that their deaths were drug-related. Ultimately, no one was ever charged in the deaths of Hainline and Decker, and although there is no direct connection to the case at hand here, a lot of people are noticing the similarities. Death by being run over by a train, unmoving, laying on the tracks, some sort of substance between alcohol and THC in the body to kind of explain why they are there. And this led many to suspect that their deaths were drug-related as well, the two boys that we're talking about today, and that these cases might be related in some weird way.
Well, it's crazy because, like, okay, so you're just committing these murders in the same way. You know what I mean? If you were to do that, if it's just like some big drug thing, it's just kind of like, oh, so we're just not even being creative about it.
Well, you know, if you get away with it once, maybe you
get away with it again. And then it just creates a trail. Like, and then, I mean, and the two initial boys were, you know, I mean, not to say that if you smoke weed, you're going to be down this drug path of like harder drugs, but you know, you get it from a dealer or something like that. And, you know, they get it from someone that probably does like sell harder drugs. The door is cracked open to that world.
Sure. I see where you're heading. I'm about to jump up from the back seat and grab that wheel and yank it to the side in a second.
Okay.
But before we get there, I don't recall, Christian maybe help me out here, when it comes to the Oklahoma case where Hainline and Decker were both found in a similar manner, I don't know for a fact if this train saw them and stopped or if it continued through. So Christian, if you don't mind fact checking that for a second, because my assumption is that it might have continued on through, and looking at this particular case, maybe they covered the boys with the tarp so that way the train conductor just thought it was some trash. Just didn't know what it was, because a train of that size and that speed would kind of just mow over whatever kind of stuff would be in there and move on. You've seen it hit cars and trucks before.
Right. It's not like a tarp is going to derail the whole entire thing.
Yeah. And so maybe whoever did this kind of hoped the train wouldn't actually stop, would kind of do the deed and continue on, and then it would be a missing persons case as they maybe scooped up the evidence. That's kind of what I was thinking as I was reading this at this point.
Oh, I can see that. That's interesting.
Yeah, but the tarp moving and the train conductor or the train engineer saying, those are people, we got to stop. Maybe that's what threw a wrench in whatever this sinister plan is.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Because going back, there was a tarp involved.
Well, there was and there wasn't, right?
Right, it wasn't recovered, but the train conductor said he saw a tarp, and then now we have another case that's very similar in which there was also a tarp. And so it seems like there's a theme here, and it seems like this is the method that they were using.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, I don't know if there was a tarp in the 1985 case.
Okay.
I do know that they were on the tracks in a similar manner.
Got it. Okay.
Maybe that's why in this moment they didn't get away with it, so to speak, but kind of did. I don't know. Christian, let us know. What do you think? Did that train stop on the Oklahoma accident? Do you know?
I am not finding anything, so I don't know, unfortunately.
Okay. That's okay. I appreciate you checking it out. It's kind of more of a detail than anything, but suffice to say, those two individuals were identified, and it was very similar, and I think that's very strange, especially when that unsolved case started getting roped into the idea of drugs. And so, are these two cases related, and are both related to drugs? Let's think about that as I give you another backstory, and we'll all kind of pincer maneuver into the conclusion here. Now, back in the day, there was a commercial pilot named Barry Seal. This was a pilot, but also an undercover drug smuggler for the Medellin cartel out of Colombia. Now, Seal began to use the airport in the small town of Mena, Arkansas, as his drug transshipment location, essentially a way to move drugs from a plane to a truck or to other vehicles. It was his hub, essentially. Now, Mena, to kind of give you this map now, is 103 miles or 166 kilometers east of Alexander. Fun fact, if this doesn't sound familiar to you, it might. There's an entire movie specifically around Barry Seal and his drug smuggling activities. It's called American Made, starring Tom Cruise. As we were researching this, I was like, this sounds exactly like that Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah.
And it is.
It is, yeah.
About a man who would fly low over the swamps and drop boxes and bunches of cocaine to designated drops in the middle of nowhere that people would go pick them up.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is fact. This was based on reality. Seal and his cohorts would fly planes carrying these illicit drugs, usually cocaine, but could be anything, would drop them over predetermined sites in remote areas all across the southern states, and they would fly low under cover of dark, sometimes midnight, sometimes early morning, but always at dark. And the drugs would then be packaged in these small capsules, essentially. So when they dropped, the parachute would open and they would float down to wherever. So to you and me, it would be out in the sticks. But to somebody who might be living in a small town, who might actually be remote, they might stumble into this.
Yeah. And then it's like, hey, you know some information that you shouldn't be knowing.
Yeah.
But it's like, look, not saying like the drugs don't tie to government officials or whatnot, but it's also just like, wait a minute. So if it was drug dealers, how does that tie into the rigmarole, the chaos, the carnival that was the case?
Let me untie that knot for you, because that is a wonderful question. I want to close the loop on Seal, though, real quick. Seal was murdered in 1986, and so he wouldn't have been active during this particular year. However, drug drops still continued. When something's lucrative, you don't give it up for one guy. Now, several of these supposed continued drug drops, allegedly, occurred in the Alexander area, and that's the foundation for this entire theory. So some theorize that Henry and Ives might have come across one of these drug drops and then fell victim to the corrupted drug underworld, seeing faces, knowing things that implicated them to the point where whoever it was said, you gotta go. So now you ask, why is the government involved? How are they involved? Let's start to open that up a little bit. In March of 1990, an Arkansas prosecutor for the 7th Judicial District named Gene Duffy was appointed to create the 7th Judicial District Drug Task Force. Their job was to investigate these rumors of trafficking and corruption, specifically in Saline County, where this story began, where the boys lived, and the entire surrounding areas, of course. So some reports state that the day Duffy was hired, her boss warned her not to investigate any sort of public officials. Hold on to that.
Okay.
So this task force now is investigating many reports that are pouring out of Saline about low-flying planes disrupting the community, waking people up, whatever it is. We got low-flying planes. So they're going, well, that's interesting. That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Let's look. They determined that the planes were being used for drug drops.
Yeah, there it is.
They said then that the deaths of Henry and Ives were very likely tied to the smuggling ring in Mina.
Yeah.
Most notably, the task force suspected the involvement of one Dan Harmon. You remember him?
Yes.
Pull out that old memory. He's the lawyer who represented both of the boys' families. So the guy that the family is most trusting to seek justice, or at least find closure, to bring someone to justice, is implicated, potentially, in this entire drug smuggling ring.
Oof. Dude, when you're dealing with drugs, especially high-end drugs, those people are connected, man. They've got their fingers in stuff. Politicians or like people with power. And so, yeah, no, a lawyer, but for the one that you're using is just like betraying you this entire time, most likely.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Dude, insane. So I will say, it's a suspicion. Is that a word? They suspect it at this point. But we've only just begun. So let's talk about Harmon for a second. You know, Harmon served as the Arkansas state prosecutor from 78 to 80. He was in private practice at that time and was appointed by Judge John Cole as special prosecutor in the case. He led the grand jury investigation with the help of assistant prosecutor Richard Garrett. So that's kind of how he ended up involved in this. Duffy alleges that Harmon requested to be special prosecutor in order to sabotage the investigation because he himself was a drug user or in some way involved in this drug smuggling process.
Right, could be just profiting from it.
Additionally, several people associated with Harmon died in horrible ways following the murders. You gotta see the eyebrows raised through the roof when patterns like this show up.
When you see a trail, you go, I'm gonna follow this.
Indeed.
Oh, God.
So this isn't just one or two either. Let me walk you through all these mysteriously timed deaths. 2 days after Officer Steed lost his re-election, one of Harmon's alleged informants, named Keith McCaskill, was murdered, stabbed 113 times.
How do you do that to somebody?
When you see a murder of 113, I mean, once you get over like 5 stabs, you're starting to look at something aggressive, vindictive, like there's retribution there, right?
Yeah.
There's what's the word I'm looking for? Payback or whatever.
Yeah.
Revenge. That's the word. And so 113 times from somebody that was known to be an alleged informant, at least, allegedly. McCaskill was tasked with taking aerial photographs of the crime scene. So that's interesting. Somebody who had direct, tangible evidence of what the crime scene looked like from above, stabbed 113 times. Now on January 29th, 1989, 26-year-old Greg Collins was murdered after receiving 3 shotgun hits to the face.
Dude, everyone's getting taken out.
Very much so. And that doesn't sound like an accident. 3 repeated shots to the face also reeks of overt aggression.
It does.
And revenge. You know what I mean?
It does, yeah.
You don't just accidentally...
Personal.
Yeah. So Collins was one of the people called to testify before the grand jury. Now, before Collins' death, his friend, Keith Coney, who was also supposed to testify, died in a motorcycle accident. That's probably one of the most innocent accidents of these, but still the timing is very interesting. It's like any of these other cases that we've heard before where someone is about to whistleblow or they're about to give like their testimony on a key case, and then an accident with a staircase happens or an accident with a window, or you know what I mean? Like we've seen, smelled, and heard these all over the place.
Yes. It just... The timing, man, and the importance of these people. It's hard to pass up the thoughts of like, where's the foul play here?
Right. Why is death pivoting around the guy who is supposed to represent both families? It's very weird. And we're not even done yet. Jeff Rhodes told his family that he feared for his life, confessing that he knew too much about these murders. The murders, I should reiterate, about Ives and Henry, yes, but also the murder of McCaskill. He's saying to his family, I know too much. I am in danger. And then, in April of 1989, his body was found at the dump in Little Rock, Arkansas, after he had been shot twice in the head and then set on fire.
Someone's cleaning up shop aggressively. That's what's going on here. Like, my God, there's like a vendetta here. Like, someone is out for blood.
And finally, because we're not done yet,
Oh my God.
there was a man named Daniel Bearden, aka Booney. He was also called to testify, but he never made it because he simply disappeared. We don't know what happened to him. Now, all of these deaths were ruled as homicides in March of 1990 after being investigated, but there's no reported arrests. No one was held accountable for any of these untimely deaths. About 3 months after the formation of the task force, we're now kind of getting into it. They're investigating Harmon and all of this. It's now June 1990. Harmon was elected as the special prosecutor of Saline and the surrounding counties. Now, after Duffy learned of Harmon's drug use, she prepared indictments against him. No one should be serving office if you're pretty obviously aware of their drug use, not being in the right state of mind, all of these things. I think that's very standard, or it should be very standard for any serving official. However, before these indictments could be issued, Harmon must have been made aware of these things, and he then goes off to make disparaging comments towards Duffy, basically discrediting her, and this then leads to her being fired in November of 1990. Despite this, oh, I love this part. Despite this, she continues to work with her team to investigate the link between the boys' murders and the drug operations happening in Mena. Bless her heart.
Yeah.
We need more people like this.
Ew.
So she's fired now, but she's still working with her team trying to figure this out. Something isn't sitting right. And by December, they had gathered enough proof to take their findings to Chuck Banks, the United States attorney at the time who was overseeing the investigation into the corruption of Saline County. Now, what really blows my gasket is the fact that now at this juncture, we know a drug smuggling ring is happening 100 miles east. We know that there is open corruption in Saline County. We know the constituents of this county and of Arkansas are in a tizzy about what's going down. 2 minors have now been involved and killed in some way. I don't know how everything doesn't just shut down and how the same... I mean, you don't know which authority figure is corrupt or not, but like the fact that it is allowed to perpetuate and policies and things keep happening, it's like the parallels are undeniable. I hate to make things political, but it's just... the corruption, man, the constant corruption in politics is just absolutely wild. People just being bought out left and right. Dude, it's like... Sorry, I'm gonna get off on a tangent for a second, but it's like when corruption pops its way into an authoritative level,
right?
A county level and then a state level, it's like it can only go up because to unfurl it, to blow it up, it would be so devastating. It would be so just unprecedented that you kind of just continue this, sweep it under the rug and hope it kind of stops.
Yeah.
But it only gets bigger, it only gets worse, it only gets darker and more sinister. And so I feel like that's what we're watching here.
No, I completely agree. It's just like, how far does the rabbit hole go?
Yeah.
And like, where's the root of the infection? How can we get it out?
Apt analogy once again. So, okay, so it's December. They're taking their proof to Chuck Banks, the United States attorney, trying to figure out if they can really pin this all down. Now, some reports state that she actually brought this information to Banks's assistant instead, which would be attorney Bob Gavar, and that he was the one in charge of the corruption investigation. Some nuance there, but either way. Duffy claims that Banks told her their investigation would continue. However, just 6 months later, now it's June 1991, he cleared all Saline County public officials of any wrongdoing. The guy up top, supposed to be helping out, he goes, everything looks good here. Listen, I don't know what I don't know. I just know this smells wrong, so it feels wrong.
I hate it. No one's ever held accountable in like the world of politics, man. People just do like the goofiest things as a circus.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, yeah, I guess. It's like, no, that's illegal, or that can't do that, or that should be investigated. And it's like, it is what it is. Like, all right.
Yep. It's a lot. And again, I said something about making things political. Everything's politics now. So like, I'm stressed. I'm stressed looking at this case because of the parallels. Okay. Quick rewind. 6 months after this December proof is issued to one of these two guys, they clear Saline County public officials of any wrongdoing. And then, a few years later, now it's 1993, Linda Ives would request to have the sheriff's office reopen the investigation into the boys' deaths. The case was subsequently reopened, so I appreciate that, and It was assigned to Detective John Brown. Among this second investigation would come a letter from Charlene Wilson dated May 28, 1993. Now, in this letter, she claims she was among a group of people who were waiting near these train tracks for a drug drop the night of the boys' murders. She named none other than Keith McCaskill, the guy who died from 113 stab wounds.
Yeah.
She also names Dan Harmon, both as being at the scene with her.
Way more hands-on than I thought they would be.
Way hands-on, though she claims that the boys were already dead when she arrived to this group at the tracks. Unfortunately, this letter would not come to be known to the families until, drumroll, 2015. 22 years later, the families finally become aware of this confession that someone said that they were there that night.
That seems a little unfortunate.
Yeah. That year, I believe 2015, a retired law enforcement friend of Linda's took the letter to her new lawyer, David Lewis. So now that's probably not allowed, but somebody who's retired had access to some information that says, hey, I think you kind of need this and you weren't made aware of it. Here, give this to your new lawyer. He then asks then prosecutor Ken Cassidy to press charges, but Cassidy refused, saying that the letter was at times incoherent. Limited reports state that although Wilson admitted to being high on cocaine and methamphetamine while writing the letter, her claims can be corroborated by 12-year-old Tom Niehaus. So the web we weave, it's getting complicated, but suffice to say, the letter was written under the influence, and so it's a little bit wobbly. But then a 12-year-old comes along and accidentally corroborates this story. So this 12-year-old, Niehaus, claims that his friends were playing in the area and they noticed 5 people on the train tracks. He was actually able to identify Dan Harmon out of this group.
Ooh.
So this is keeping Dan centerpiece to this whole thing.
Yeah, he's pretty locked in at this point.
And so poor little 12-year-old Niehaus saw Harmon beckon both Henry and Ives as they arrived to the train tracks. Albeit hesitant, they eventually walked over to the group. This is kind of how he's describing the scene. He then said he saw Harmon speaking to them for a few minutes, and he was getting a bad feeling about the situation, so Niehaus and his friends kind of left the scene. They were like, I don't know if we should be seeing this.
Right.
Let's just get out of here.
It's weird.
Yeah. And as they're walking away, he describes what he hears as a gunshot, like a loud bang, and he sees a flash kind of light the night sky for just a brief second. So we're kind of painting a picture here of what might have gone down that night. Limited sources report that Ronnie Godwin and Mike Crook, just two standby individuals not involved in this case at all, just eyewitnesses, they say they saw Ives and Henry at a grocery store around 4 a.m. and they were speaking with none other than Keith Coney, the man who couldn't testify because of his lethal motorcycle accident. So these two men see the now deceased boys talking to somebody who also ended up dying before they could testify in this grocery store at 4 a.m.
Way too many people tethered together.
Yes.
With, like, significance.
Indeed. So they aren't necessarily watching this unfold because they have no reason to suspect something sinister is afoot. This is just their memory looking back. But they describe the scene, right? These two boys talking with Coney. Coney then leaves. And shortly after he leaves, two police officers arrive in, I think it was an unmarked police car. Either way, these two police officers arrive and beat these boys unconscious.
What?
Yeah. And they said it was unclear what prompted this attack. This is just what Ronnie Godwin and Mike Crook saw. Crook was then able to identify one of these two men as Kirk Lane, who was a narcotics detective. And the description of the other man matched that of Officer Jay Campbell, who did end up in prison after the fact due to drug-related charges. So whether it be professionally or recreationally, both of these two men identified were somehow involved with narcotics or drugs, right?
Yeah. It seems like there are people of power and authority that are involved in this drug ring.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
So Lane and Campbell are like, listen, you can't be saying any of that. They sue for defamation. They both lose. And these claims from Wilson and Niehaus prompted the FBI to open an investigation into the boys' deaths. However, once again, it was determined that no evidence of a crime had been found. It's all eyewitness testimony. In theory, it's he said, she said.
Yeah.
And I'm not a judge or, lawyer or anything, so I don't know if they need tangible evidence to go further. So they didn't find any evidence of a crime. It should be noted that documents released later via the Freedom of Information Act show that law enforcement was involved in the deaths and subsequent cover-up. There was in fact an FBI document dated February 6, 1995 that states, and there's 4 different quotes here from throughout this document that I'm going to quote. Quote, "It appears that the special prosecutor appointed in this case, name blacked out, may have misused his authority and disregarded other leads that may have assisted efforts to bring this investigation to a logical conclusion." Another excerpt says this, quote, "Certain Saline County officials may have conspired to cover up investigation into the deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives." A third excerpt says, quote, "The investigation revealed that law enforcement officials in Little Rock area may have been involved in homicide. Law enforcement officials alleged to be involved in the drug trafficking in Saline County include list of blacked out names." And the final excerpt we have is, quote, "Since the beginning of the investigation by the special prosecutor, the case has become riddled with rumors and innuendos. Special Prosecutor Harmon and Assistant Richard Garrett requested assistance from the Arkansas State Police, yet continuously withheld information from them." End quote. So this is coming from the unbiased federal level, the FBI looking into this case.
It seems pretty clear cut at this point that there was some drug trafficking and the boys stumbled upon it and then they took action. And then like it usually happens, that world, people turn on each other. And so some people are met with accidents and some people I think at this point, it's like, how high up does it go?
That is a very good question. Now, before we continue on, there's a few more pieces of information here on this particular theory to round it all out, and then we have one smaller one. But based on these claims, here is a timeline at a glance, what many suspect happened. I think I just want to truncate all this information into something succinct. So that night, per this theory, Henry and Ives went spotlighting, hunting, using a .22 caliber rifle. Some reports say that it's Henry's, some reports say that it's Ives. They got a gun with them. Around 2 a.m., they encountered a group of 5 individuals while walking on the tracks. This group includes Dan Harmon, Keith McCaskill, Charlene Wilson, and at least 2 others who remain unknown. At this point, a confrontation ensues, and at least one shot is potentially fired, and maybe it was from the .22 caliber rifle that the 2 boys had. Shortly after, the 2 boys ran into Keith Coney, who was out riding his motorcycle at a nearby grocery store. It's suspected that they revealed to him what happened, and at that moment, Kirk Lane and Jay Campbell pulled up off-duty, unmarked police car, like I said, and they were then beaten and detained. And it's suspected that Coney fled, knowing that this was maybe bound to happen. It's believed that Campbell struck Ives in the back of the head with the butt of his .22 caliber gun, rendering him unconscious. They were then both transported by the officers back to the tracks, where it's theorized that Ives may have succumbed to his head injury and passed away, and sometime around this, before or after his death, Henry might have been stabbed. I think the evidence is pretty clear on that, but it's the question of, was this stab fatal or not, right?
Yep.
Their bodies were then placed on the tracks and covered up with a tarp, thinking that the train crew would maybe pass over these bodies, thinking it was just rubble or just debris or what have you, and move on with their lives without a problem. It seems this tarp had become loose, exposing the bodies to the crew, leading to them stopping the train and calling for authorities rather than proceeding out of the area, which might have greatly complicated this scene. So that's a lot to digest. It all makes a lot of sense. It does feel like movie plot, but based on what little we have,
it kind of ties everything together pretty nicely, and things do line up, and people that seems like we should hold them accountable seem to be placed properly.
So that's kind of the general theory here, and I think it is well-founded, but there's a few pieces of aftermath that happened in the years following. So Harmon was convicted of several things. racketeering, conspiracy, extortion, and drug possession with intent to distribute. That was in the year 1997. He served an 11-year prison sentence for the crimes. And then in 2018, very, very recently, a man named Billy Jack Haynes came forward stating that he witnessed the murders of Ives and Henry. Although he was a full-time wrestler for the WWF, I haven't even heard of that in a while, the World Wrestling Federation, which is now the WWE, he had a side gig because he was jacked. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but suffice to say, he's a very strong and built man. His side gig was transporting and trafficking cocaine. He says this job eventually brought him to Arkansas, and I'll quote him here. Quote, "In August of 1987, I was contacted by an Arkansas criminal politician and was asked if I would provide muscle at an Arkansas drug transaction." End quote. So that does line up nearly with our timeline, just a year prior. But he says that after years of guilt, he eventually filmed and uploaded a video confessing all of this. And I'll quote him a few times from that video. Quote, "While conducting security for the drug money drop, I witnessed the murders of two young boys, Kevin Ives and Don Henry. They were murdered by other individuals who were working for the same criminal politician. Their bodies were placed on the railroad tracks to be mutilated by a passing train." End quote. He also says at the end there, quote, "I'm standing here putting my life on the line telling you that I could very well be killed. They have to be taken down." Now, it's unclear whether law enforcement ever spoke to Haynes or if his claims were ever further investigated. But it does fit the narrative here, and it is also a confession implicating himself. And so we have seen people raise their hand to say, "I'm the Zodiac killer." So it's not unheard of for someone to definitely implicate themselves, but it does fit nicely into this, and maybe it does add some weight to this theory.
But also, it's like, what do you, like at this point, I guess whoever's left, hold them accountable. But it's just so far down the line. It's just so unfortunate.
Yeah, I don't know what you do. I feel like 11 years is pretty short for somebody who is in a good position to mess with a lot of cases. If you're racketeering, conspiring, extorting people, you got drug possession, and you have the intent to distribute it, and so you're part of this Mesa drug organization smuggling drugs in from Colombia or whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
11 years. Heck, dude, you were free 9 years after this murder went down. I mean, what's 11 years?
Yeah.
This is wild.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I feel like even if it's delayed justice needs to happen. If nothing else, to clear out the as you said, the infection a little bit and really build trust again in the system or in the authoritative kind of hierarchy, as it were. You need to be able to rely on the people that look after you.
Yeah, the people that are appointed into power, you have to be able to rely on them, right? Because if not, then there's just chaos.
So, all in all, many theorize that the boys essentially were innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of this local corruption that went higher up than we could possibly imagine. This actually cracks into the next theory. I think this is almost, it kind of builds off of what we just talked about and takes it in the realm of conspiracy and, suspicion, but into a higher level. This is where I want to be careful about defamation and kind of just speak to what people kind of are thinking here. But the resignation of Dr. Fahmy Malak aligned with the presidential campaign of Bill Clinton. And because the pair were close friends, some alleged that Dr. Malak might have made a deal with Clinton. However, Dr. Malak repeatedly denied these accusations. This then leads us to the Clinton Chronicles, which was released in 1994. It was a set of propaganda videos that hinted to Clinton being linked to several crimes. And one of these crimes, shown in this video, were the deaths of Ives and Henry. This video further fueled the theory that while he was governor of Arkansas, Clinton may or may not have been connected to a scandal involving large shipments of drugs, guns, and money from Central America. This shipment was said to have passed through Arkansas at the Mena Intermountain Municipal Airport, where Barry Seal was said to have operated. So this doesn't add a lot more to it, but it kind of takes it a little bit more into the realm of like, maybe this did go up to the governor.
Yep.
And maybe the governor was aware of these activities, turned the other way, was paid off, whatever that looks like.
Yep.
And then went off and became president. And so it behooved him to kind of cut off any sort of like leads, like, I don't want to be tied to this, therefore I'm not going to look into this because it could tie me to it. And so there you have it.
Yeah,
right?
Very scary. Very terrifying.
Very. Now, in August of 2016, Linda Ives filed a lawsuit citing that the officials violated the Freedom of Information Act. However, the suit was dismissed in 2019. I asked Kat a little bit more about this. I was like, was there censorship in this document that shouldn't have been there? Because when you file for Freedom of Information Act, they can censor certain elements, but it is incumbent upon them if they can fulfill the request to do so. Kat Cardenas, our researcher, essentially said that she sued because they repeatedly ignored her requests. And from what Kat could gather, it's documents related to the case using context. She's assuming that the documents were from police and FBI investigations. So essentially, she's looking for documentation that could help her figure out what might have happened. And that because they weren't fulfilled, she sued them, and then that case was dismissed a few years after. Linda Ives specifically was credited with dedicating her life to solving the murder of Kevin Ives and Don Henry privately until her death in the recent years, 2021 to be exact. As of present day, this case remains unsolved, but the conspiracy that surrounds it, the idea that this could permeate into government and go all the way to the top level, again, you almost can't not address the elephant in the room that echo in modern conversations of conspiracy with Epstein files, with, I mean, it's a whole other topic. There's so much to talk about there, but you almost can't not point out the parallels and the concerns that come with authoritative figures.
It also feels like this was caught because it was so blatant too, right? Like, imagine all the stuff that went under the radar.
Yeah. It's like an iceberg.
Yeah, it also just seems like this kind of happened because of the fact of like the conductor slowed down a little bit as opposed to just completely going over with all the different carts, you know? It seems like a freak accident that they were discovered. And then so you gotta think like, what about all the other times they got away with it?
It's hard for the mind not to go there. You know, you think of it as an iceberg. Like, was this the one that we happened to catch? How far did this go? And again, that's where I hearken to the modern conversations, is like, that's the biggest fear with something like the Epstein files, is you go, how far does it go? Who does it impact? Mm-hmm. Regardless of who that impacts, by the way, they all need to be brought to justice, no matter what. Every single person, just to put that out there. I want to be very clear. But it also goes for this case. No matter who they are, no matter what they've done or haven't done, if they're involved with something like this and it leads to the death of anybody, you would hope gets weeded out before it could permeate. But it's just like you watch this domino effect where they all can protect each other. The county sheriff looks after the lawyer who was involved, and then you have the Arkansas State medical examiner who's also looking after it. It's just, if the buck doesn't stop anywhere, how can you sleep at night? This is just one of those cases that, yes, it remains unsolved. It's terrible, but it's one of those ones that just inspired genuine fear. Like, where does it stop? Where does this kind of corruption continue? Is it there? Like, it's horrible.
How do you trust these people?
A case like this makes you nihilistic almost. You know what I mean?
It does. Makes you feel doom and gloom a little bit.
It makes you want to give up. But
yeah.
Don't, task force. Please don't give up. Justice must prevail no matter what the circumstances call for. And you know what? Hats off to Linda Ives and author Duffy as well. I think we can take pages out of their books and continue to hunt for justice no matter what form it takes. But this was a wild case. Again, we almost didn't cover it because it seemed kind of like, oh, okay, well, this happened. It's very unfortunate. I didn't even know like how many theories there were when we first kind of was researching this a few months ago. And when we officially cracked into this, we went, oh my goodness, this goes way further than I could have possibly imagined. But talk about wrong place at the wrong time.
It is unfortunate, man. They're just out and about, and they think they stumbled across like some bigger things, and then that was that. They couldn't be left alive to report or possibly report what's going on here.
Horrible. And maybe the one person they talked to, Coney.
Right.
He couldn't even testify. He ended up dead before he could testify. But also, like, the kids are trusting that this adult figure might be able to carry on what they said to someone else, like that this truth could get out. And it turns out, nope, he was also part of it. Coerced or directly involved, whatever it might look like,
Yep.
involved in it.
Still involved. I mean, look, again, don't want to be doom and gloom, but it just feels like not everybody was held accountable, right? I'm sure there's like little people or like larger people that were like, okay, they were involved and they just weren't caught. And so you gotta think that like that goes a far, far way.
Some people sleep too well, and I go, how do you sleep?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, again, they'd probably just grow numb to it. You know what I mean?
I guess so, dude. Oh man, what a case, you know? What a heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching case. Been labeled the boys on the tracks, but yes, this has been the case featuring the unfortunate death and circumstances surrounding Don Henry and Kevin Ives. With that, any final thoughts before we close out and thank the task force, Fredo?
Just a complete chaotic mess of a story, to be honest. It just doesn't feel like, I don't know, it feels like there wasn't much justice served.
Doesn't feel like it.
Especially the duration and right time and everything. So yeah, it's kind of a sad one. It's unfortunate, man.
I mean, to some degree, you know, when it comes to true crime, there's always that degree of sadness.
Oh,
and,
definitely.
But when you have a story like this, it's truly stranger than fiction. But the unfortunate side is it's reality. And so you just think like, if this is possible, I don't know, again, I don't want to be nihilistic here. I'm with you though. If this is possible, what else?
Yeah. I can't help but think that. I can't help but think that. I know it's like, it's all going to be fine, but your mind wanders on ones like this, you know?
Yeah, truly. All right, Task Force. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for yet another Mystery Monday. This is a wild one. I'm eager, as always, to hear your thoughts. If you'd like to join us on our Patreon exclusive Discord, go to redwebpod.com and join the likes of our newest elite member, Hillary Lee, and our buff scientist of the week, Haley Danvers. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the squonks of the week. We got Gavin Day, Lo K, Holster, and Jordan Chase, just to name a few. Thank you all so much for keeping our lights on and supporting us directly. Like I said at the top of the show, we're always doing something else to keep the conversation going, whether it be on Discord or on Break Room or Movie Club or the polls that we have, all the exclusives that we have for you guys. Or if you just want the podcast ad-free, or you just want a buddy to talk about things like this with, you know, I'm lucky I got Fredo, Christian, Kat, Jam, the whole Red Web team. But if you're looking for somebody to just like blow your mind with and talk about these with, share the podcast with a friend, a family member. Hey, a stranger on the subway. Just stand a little further back from that yellow line, but stand further back and then tell them, hey, listen to Red Web. You won't believe what they're talking about. All right, Task Force, thank you all so much as always. And Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.